Hello and welcome to the first episode of the newly branded Common Thread, what was and used to be the Embracing Human podcast. And this podcast is undergoing an evolution. Through the first 40 podcasts that I filmed with the individuals I interviewed, I was slowly and subtly investigating the commonalities across the myriad of different human experiences. We had everything from famous musicians like Drew McManus of Satsang to world-class leading breathworkers like Witali Martinau to my mother and everything in between. What is the common thread between all of these people? What were they looking for? How were they looking for it? What did they find? And what was the gold to share with each of you? A couple months ago, the name came to me, The Common Thread, and instantly I knew that that was the name of the show. I am evolving this show to still tell the stories and highlights and lowlights of the individuals that I choose to interview. It's one of the questions I'm going to ask every guest, every episode, is what's the thread you've been pulling on? And so here we are. I'm so glad you're here. Hello and welcome to the first episode of the newly branded Common Thread, what was and used to be the Embracing Human podcast. I am Scott Stone, and I am still your host. And this podcast is undergoing an evolution. Through the first 40 podcasts that I filmed with the individuals I interviewed, I was slowly and subtly investigating the commonalities across the myriad of different human experiences. We had everything from famous musicians like Drew McManus of Satsang to world-class leading breathworkers like Witali Martinau to my mother and everything in between. CEOs, artists, etc. And in that, I was subtly looking for what is the common thread between all of these people. What were they looking for? How were they looking for it? What did they find? And what was the gold to share with each of you? And it hit me a couple of months ago that I had an opportunity to claim this podcast as my own. I started it with my roommate at the time and have always wanted to have my own podcast. And when he took a step back and I claimed this as my own, the name never quite felt right. And just a bit of a story, the podcast name actually came out as a backup. I originally had named this podcast the To Be Human podcast. And right before launching, I realized that one of my friends actually had a podcast called To Be Human. And it didn't feel right to have the same name. And so I chose the Embracing Human podcast as a platform to tell stories about how different individuals embraced their human journey. And yet, when Leo and I split up from this project, I felt like there was an opportunity for it to be something of my own creation. And a couple months ago, the name came to me, The Common Thread, simply. And instantly I knew that that was the name of the show. That what was the Embracing Human podcast would be called The Common Thread at some point in the future. And then it took me a couple months to finally embrace just going for it. Just declaring that this is what it is, to switch over the branding, and to adapt accordingly. And so here we are. I am evolving this show to still tell the stories and highlights and lowlights of the individuals that I choose to interview. And I have an absolute lineup, a smashing lineup of guests for 2026. Everything from world-class musicians to actors and actresses to writers and coaches and just some of the most incredibly inspiring humans that I know. And I'm also leaning into my network. To this point, every person that has come on the podcast has been a personal connection. And I, in 2026, want to lean into the multiple degrees of separation that my network knows as well. And so I'm going to stretch myself to bring on some guests that old Scott might not have thought possible, that his reach wasn't quite there. And now I feel confident both in my abilities as an interviewer and space holder and brand, but also just in my uniqueness and interesting aspects of my own story to cultivate these connections with these new and soon to be friends. And so, yeah, I wanted to take a moment to announce this publicly, to give the listenership a preview of coming attractions. And so the way I wanted to do that was to discuss some of the common threads that I saw, both in the interviewers as well as myself in 2025. One of the most notable things that I saw in the guests thus far is a desire to make a compelling meaning out of life itself, to find and forge meaning in some of the hardest and lowest points of life, whether that be physical health challenges, relationships falling apart, businesses failing, or otherwise. The desire for the human part of these individuals, myself included, to find a compelling meaning of why the hell is this happening to me? I know for myself, as many of you are aware, my dog died in 2023. And when Chester passed, I didn't know how to make sense of it. I had never experienced grief on that level, and I'd never really experienced grief, if I'm blatantly honest. My grandma died at 94, but it was kind of a breath of, or like a relief because, not a breath of fresh air, but a relief because she had dementia for like 10 years. But when Chester died, not only was it sudden, I didn't know how to prepare for it. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any coping strategies. I barely had community. And so I fell into the abyss. And for the first year, didn't know what to make of it. And then in 2025, decided to choose a powerful meaning for what I wanted it to mean. And the story that I chose was that Chester knew I was ready to evolve. He knew that where I was headed, he couldn't go. And he knew that he had to pull the plug in order for me to say yes to that life. I don't know if he knew that Hawaii was coming, but he knew that his time was up. And while it has been the hardest thing I have ever navigated in my entire life, it was the most loving thing that could have happened. I worked through probably 6 months of guilt for putting my dog down, knowing that there was a part of me that could have kept him alive in probably the most uncomfortable suffering state, but at least I wouldn't have been alone. And I chose one of the hardest decisions, one that I don't think a human really should ever have to make, is ending the life of another living being. And afterwards was confronted with another common thread, which is this idea of aloneness, of separation, of being over here from you. One of, I think, the hardest things that we deal with on this planet, in this reality, is the idea of being separate from other. We live in a relative universe, and the way we know ourselves is by relativity, relationship to another loved one, or to a business, or to the colder spot of your bed when you move your foot from where it's warm. And so when I fell into this abyss of excruciating loneliness, I found myself there. Parts of me that I forgot existed. Part of me that I hoped I would forget about, honestly. Moving to Hawaii, Leo put it really well one day. He said, Scott, when you come to Hawaii, the island culture will show you that most people already have established friend groups, so it might feel like the loneliest place on earth. And yet, it is quite possibly the most beautiful backdrop on the planet to find yourself. And that became this reminder for me that life wasn't doing this to me to punish me. Life was like, hey, dude, it's finally time to get to know the parts of me that I have previously hated, that I would excise out of me with a scalpel if I could choose it. And to fall in love with the extra belly fat and the low bank account and the dysfunctional family and all these things that I had spent the previous 10 years trying to podcast and read and workshop and retreat my way out of. And just like the grief that Chester exhumed, there was no amount of breath work or cold plunges or mushrooms or cannabis or otherwise that would make that go away. And so I learned how to accept these things. And I would say that's another common thread that it helped me see, was that so many of these guests, dare I say all of them, I got to witness a part of them that came forward to love specific aspects of their lives. When so many of us have spent days, weeks, years trying to change these parts of us that are so uniquely ourselves. And in fact, it is upon accepting and embracing them fully that then they become gifts to the world. Or in the case of maladaptive coping strategies or otherwise, they just fall apart. They fall away. They disappear. And so when I really started to accept myself, my whole life changed. In 2025, I quit smoking weed. I quit watching porn. I moved out of my house with Leo and got my own place. I broke up with my girlfriend and really got to know these parts of me that I used to fucking hate. I used to wish I was someone else in a different body, with a different bank account, with a different partner, with a different family. And there were parts of me that I absolutely loved. The coach part of me that absolutely loves helping people actualize their dreams by embracing their past, accepting their present, and getting excited about their future. I absolutely loved how big my heart was because of the love I had for Chester and therefore my next dog. I absolutely loved how much I love my family and how much therapy I did in order to not cut them out of my lives for what I felt like was a lot of reasonable evidence to do so. So many aspects of myself that I was trying to change for so long, I just started to hold and apologize to and forgive for. And the addictions went away. I quit vaping. Weed, alcohol, nicotine, and porn in 1 year while moving out on my own and breaking up with my girlfriend. It still astounds me that I did all that in 1 year. One of my favorite Tony Robbins quotes is, most people will overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. And if that's what I can do in a year, God, what could I do in a decade? I sit to you here right now as a declaration that this will be one of the largest podcasts on the planet, that I will be one of the biggest coaches in the world. It is my absolute declaration, testament, and legacy that I look to leave in this planet. And for the first time, everything around me reflects that. My parents believe it. They tell me that this is going to be super successful, and they see me as an incredible coach. My clients, my friends, and most importantly, myself. I truly believe it now. And I'd be lying to you if I said this was the norm. And I'm not saying I don't have doubt, because I think doubt is a requirement for faith to exist, right? Faith arises out of doubt. And so, yeah, this aspect of, another thread that I saw in these humans, and it wouldn't so far as to call it God, because I think it's bigger than that. I think these humans started to find and cultivate a new reverence for life, for the gifts that they got, or the breaks that they caught, or, you know, I guess the fights that they fought. I only said that because it was a cool rhyme, but to me, a big part of this is learning how to have fun again. I've spent so long healing, so many retreats, so much medicine, so much therapy, so many workshops, so many coaches. And this past year, this last ceremony I did and retreat I went on, my intention was stop healing. At least stop healing my past. My past is over. Your past is over too. And if you really understand what I'm saying here, and you allow yourself to fully express and cycle the emotions that were buried alive and deep inside, when you give yourself permission to do that, you get to live into a whole new future. Uncreated blank slate of possibility. And that's been my, last couple of months of like, wow, I get to choose this whole thing as I want it and then go after it. And I don't say that to brag or boast. I say that to inspire you because I want the same for you. I want your dream to actualize as well. My dream is that all my friends and mine dreams come true. That's what I want. That's why this rebrand is coming about, is I want to share my dream with you now. I believe the reason for me sharing it is that so I have that many more anchors of humans on the planet holding my dream with me. And I want to do the same with you. I want you to share your dream with me, whether it's commenting on a post or DMing me privately or telling me in person, whatever that might look like, so I can help hold your dream with you. And I hear so many of them, whether it's my clients telling me of having a beautiful relationship with their kids and their spouse, or their business taking off, or moving to Hawaii, or. What is your version of that? And that to me is one of those threads, is that we're all here to dream. The two things that make us separate from monkeys are the ability to imagine, to dream. And the second is the ability to work in groups over 100, right? That's one of the most beautiful aspects of social media, is we can have mass connection now. We can be connected to hundreds of thousands, if not millions and billions of people for the first time ever in history. And two, we get to dream. And I'll be honest, it's really hard to dream when you're in fight or flight. Like, it doesn't really work. I like to say you can't change your life when you're too busy fighting for it, right? When you're stuck in chronic fatigue or chronic stress and fight or flight, it's almost impossible for you to change your life. And therefore, doing what is necessary to alleviate the symptoms of the coping strategies that our body took on to keep us safe, you get to have your dreams. I get to have mine. And so this is part of it. One of my goals, I'm just going to share them with you now because I love them. One of the goals, one specifically to this podcast, I have 3 goals for 2026, and I would love for you to comment yours if you're willing. 1, reveal my abs. I know I have abs. I don't need to get abs. I have abs. I just want to see them. That's a huge priority of mine, not for vanity, but just to know that I can commit to myself on that level. Discipline, movement, proper nutrition, not overly spiking my insulin. I want to see my abs in 2026. Number 2, I want to reach $100,000 in a month in coaching. I know it's possible. And I don't say it again because I need to buy a Range Rover. I say it because it allows me to have massive impact in the world. I want to do things with music and food and story with humans in my community. I want to create lasting impact of belonging and excitement and contribution. And I want to do it with my friends. And it's not free. So having a vehicle of financial energy to do so is a big part of that. And for that, that's one of my goals. And my third one is 1 million downloads on this podcast this year. And I need your help for that. I don't need you. I would love for you to share this podcast. I would love for you to share it with your friends on your Instagram stories, whatever it looks like, to subscribe, leave a rating, message me a guest idea, whatever it looks like. I want to get you guys involved. I want to answer your questions. I want to talk to your guests and friends. I want to give back to you as best I can. If you notice, there's never been an advertisement on this podcast. That is one of my commitments, is never monetize in that way. I have ideas on ways to provide a lot of value, and it's not going to be cutting you off in the middle of an episode so I can tell you about mushroom coffee. That's not my goal. My goal is to provide so much value and impact to this thing that it sustains itself, or I sustain myself in coaching, and this thing is just an added benefit that I pay for myself. I pay for this production every month. I put thousands of dollars into this podcast already. Tens of thousands, actually, now, over the course of this last year. I don't say it again to brag. I say that to say this is how committed I am. I am so radically committed to this, and I just am inviting you into my dream to be part of this thing, to be part of a movement. And so, yeah, now you have it. Those are my 3 dreams. Abs abundance and 1 million downloads. So, what are your questions? Who do you want me to talk to? What are the threads that you've been pulling on? That's one of the questions I'm going to ask every guest, every episode, is what's the thread you've been pulling on? And it might be something that's got your attention. It might be your ancestors' lineage and the way in which they showed up for you. It might be this new shade Pantone of purple. Whatever it is, I want to get excited about it with you. And so for that, I just am so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're listening to this and hopefully have listened to other episodes, because this is one of my favorite things to do in life. And I'm just so incredibly stoked that I have things that I can call favorites. Because for most of my life, I didn't. I shared it in a podcast with Armin Shafi, maybe episode 37, I think it was. I don't remember, something like that I almost took my life last year. I got scarily close to ending my life. And I don't say that to have you worry about me. I am in the best place I think I've ever been now. But it allowed me to ask for help. It allowed me to get really real with my family and tell them where I was struggling and not try to pretend. It allowed me to trust in medicine and do things that I never thought I would do, for how much I have sworn against the pharmaceutical industry and allopathic medicine, and really take a look at these parts of myself that were deeply wounded in my childhood and in my teens and in my 20s. And I say that because, again, I'm sober now. I'm not on any medication whatsoever. I used to be riddled with inhalers for asthma and creams for eczema and every allergy under the sun. And I can honestly say I feel like I've completely healed all of those things. That's incredible. And I believe the same is possible for you. If you're working through some autoimmune condition or sickness or illness, I believe that you can be healed completely. And maybe when you hear that, you're like, no, not me. I'm unique. I'm different. I get it. And I'll hold that for you. If it's too big or doesn't feel real or right, that's okay. I will still hold that for you. And the same goes for your relationships with your family. For those of you that have known me for a long time, let's say 5+ years, my relationships with my family were a shit show. I have cut my parents off for months at a time. I have been in fist fights with my brother in my 20s. I used to self-medicate every time I was in their presence. I would have to get catatonically high or drunk to be around them. I went back to my brothers and parents over Christmas this past 2025, completely sober. No fights, no arguments, no shame, no guilting, none of that. No weed, no alcohol, no porn, no nicotine, none of that. Again, I do not say this to brag. I say this to say this is possible. I might just be saying it for myself to believe, holy shit, I did it. Because for years, I didn't think it was possible. I still have texts in my phone that say, hey, I'm no longer willing to talk to you guys unless you're going to therapy. These are my boundaries. Right? I've cut my family completely off. And for a time, that was what was necessary. It was my healing. That was my medicine. And I am so grateful that that doesn't have to be the case anymore. That doesn't have to be my reality. That I get to choose my family in my life fully. And so, yeah, I share all that just to say, what would you like for 2026? What are you calling in? You know, by the time this podcast airs, it'll be the end of January. And for that, I think it's like 90% of humans have given up on their New Year's resolutions, if you even set resolutions. Maybe you're more evolved and you call them intentions. Or maybe, you don't even have that. But what are you committed to? What are you committed to in 2026 to creating for yourself? Please share them with me if you're willing. Message me privately. However you want to do it. I would love to know. Not just to hold you accountable and check in on you, but I'm curious what your dreams look like. I really want to know. If you're willing, please share. I didn't have any plan when I hit record. You probably could tell, actually, the way in which I was talking on the first half of this. It was it wasn't rehearsed because I didn't rehearse anything, but it was kind of, I don't know, lifeless or robotic, or this is my own critique and judgment of myself. But it's kind of hard to have a conversation with no one else around. I'm just talking to my phone. I'm talking to a camera. It's different when I get to talk to a guest. There's a tennis match going on in this. I'm just staring at a wall. And so kudos to anybody doing solo casts. This is a whole different game. Very impressed with your ability to do this. And yeah, here's to getting excited and not letting it feel like fight or flight. Here's to letting it feel like fun. Thank you all for being on this journey with me, for tuning into this episode, and for everything to come in the common thread. Thank you for being here. And until next time, aloha.